Hey, what's up? EJK here, and I'm going to be bringing you guys a breakdown between one of MarineKingPrime's games from the Group A stage Hot 6 Cup. I should just read it. Round of 16, Group A, Match 3, 2014 Hot 6 Cup, last big match. Between him and HerO on Deadwing. Dun, 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 dun. It's very nice to see Marine King bring a refreshingly new style. Just use a double adjective or double description right there. A refreshing style to the scene that is very reminiscent of his Wings of Liberty days, I believe, when he used to play, when he was very good and on top of his game way back in the day. And it's nice to see that he can bring an seemingly older style back and still make it work in this day and age. And this video is going to go over the general aspects of his play style, the decisions he makes, and what he chooses to prioritize over what others might consider standard play. I guess like he is playing a pretty standard game. This is going to be a macro game versus a macro game of HerO, but he does very small different adjustments to his army composition. We're going to see throughout this video, and I noticed it throughout the series as well, but for the sake of not doing like an hour and a half long thing of an analysis breakdown of all four of his games, I chose this one because I think it best displayed the macro traits that he has been embellishing in his style of play. We see right off the bat, he only makes 2 barracks, that's standard, but instead of making a third barracks, he adds extra 2 gas. So he is, you might consider, I wouldn't call this greedy. Maybe on a 2-player map, this would be a bit greedier because you normally want that third barracks in case the other player is going to do a 1-base all-in. But in this case, I think Marine King's style, now I have to still play around with it to figure out exactly how it works, so I'm just making some, I guess, general assumptions here based on the games I've seen, that because he gets that early gas and he focuses very heavily on early Maurader production, that he can afford to get, and we see him starting the reactor in the tech lab immediately as soon as he scouted the Nexus. So he's not just doing that blindly, and that's very smart play by him. But he focuses very heavily on Maurader production early on in the game. We can see, if you see other Terran players play, like Innovation, for example, during this Group A stage, whenever he did like a Reaper opener, he focused primarily on Marine production early in the game. And we already see it's the 6-minute timing, and I'm just going to pause the game really quickly just to give a rundown of what's going on in the production tab. First Maurader being made, 6 minutes. That's extremely fast. The only other time you would generally see a Maurader being made is when a Terran player opts to do a concussive shell rush. Maru did a 14cc into a 3 barracks, gets a tech lab, then gets concussive shells, and does a little poke with a Maurader and like 6 Marines. He's done that before. Another common example is a Reaper expand into the same build. But we see here Stim being built, and we see +1 weapons attack being researched as well with the second 100 gas. This is also generally different from what we see other Terran players tend to do. They tend to prioritize factory upgrades, or getting the factory and getting the tech that it unlocks, getting the star port up faster, and getting the medevacs out, and applying map pressure like that. But we see here also that a third barracks is being made as well by MarineKingPrime. And this is all because his general focus throughout this entire game is going to be creating a very large, very powerful, huge, scary force of tiny men. And also noticeably his +1 attack upgrades and his big emphasis on upgrades as well. Oh, and just to note, that second Maurader being built already, and there's no concussive shell push. So this is purely to build up a very big bio army by the time the stim timing hits. We see here the second tech lab also going down before the factory starts. The factory is about to start soon. Oh, but okay, well, I was saying before I got sidetracked, getting that +1 attack also emphasizes the fact that he's going to be focusing on his bio production or his bio army strength rather than getting out different kinds of tech, such as rushing out ghosts, rushing out more medevacs, more Vikings. Very different style than we're used to seeing in this TVP matchup. And just now, the factory started at about the 7-minute 20 mark. We also see two more Marauders being produced on the production tab. Combat shields going down as well at a fairly earlier than normal timing. But the big difference between Marine King's mid-game, how he's setting himself up for the first 2 medevac push until the very end of the game, or at least until the later stages of the Ghost Viking aspect part of the game, and what other Terran players do, is that he is continuously making Marauders in a purely defensive fashion. He's just building up a big army, and he's just preparing himself for the mid-game. We already see him have, before the screen went away, we already saw he had about 4 Marauders and 2 more Marauders producing. And his starport, it's not extremely late, but it is delayed by about a minute or so in favor, and we see again more Marauders being produced on the production tab. And this is giving MarineKingPrime what you might normally have at the 10-minute 30 mark when the 2 medevacs are out. Maybe usually only have 2 to 4 Marauders because you delay the reactor and the tech lab normally until around the time that the starport starts building, then you add them on and then you start producing them. So you might only have 2 Marauders to 4 Marauders max by the time the push happens, but MarineKingPrime already has 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 Marauders with 2 more producing before the 10-minute mark. That not only gives his army a gigantic amount of tankability in this early stage of the game, but also a good amount of DPS as well. Not to mention the fact that he has +1 attack already done. That part isn't quite as different, but having this large amount of Marauders early on is. And we're going to see here the trade that he takes in a little bit. I'm just getting ready to pause it because he has the large amount of Marauders, he is going to try to force an engagement. And he can actually, this is completely safe. 9 times out of 10, if the Protoss is playing standard, I'm sure you're going to be able to get a good trade if you spread out, because the Marauders give you that tank ability to tank throughout force fields, to tank Colossi shots. And right here, I just want to point out that it's very important to note exactly how many units MarineKingPrime is able to pick off for his army. The bio army isn't very expensive to remake. They all make out of barracks. They're easy to just funnel out of. He's going to have 5 barracks, so he's going to be able to produce 3 Marauders and 4 Marines at a time. So let's actually see how much he loses and how much he's able to trade off in this engagement, because he's been focusing on such a big army. And HerO he didn't ID it fast enough, all of those Marauders, otherwise he wouldn't have moved out that fast. But he still makes the best of a situation, and he's able to push Marine King back, although he still sustains significant losses. And this attack here is very important to trade off a decent amount of units. So we see here 5 Marauders and 14 Marines have been lost. I believe a couple units were killed from the Oracles. Let's just subtract about 10% off. So let's say 5 Marauders and 12 Marines were lost, or even 10. For HerO, though, the first engagement, he lost 12 Zealots, 1 Colossi, 1 Stalker, and 2 Sentries. This is very, very important to note, even though the supplies they look relatively even. The unit composition that HerO is going to be building going into the mid to late game is going to be very different. And I just want to pause to talk briefly about it for a second. 12 Zealots, okay, HerO has 6 gateways on 2 bases. That is his production right now. And he lost 12 Zealots. Not even going to say how much that is going to put on the resources lost tab, but just losing 2 production rounds worth of gateway units means that HerO's army is going to be significantly smaller throughout the rest of the game. He's going to have to replace his army so that it isn't significantly smaller throughout the rest of the game at the cost of delaying his tech. He also loses 1 Colossi, a Stalker, and 2 Sentries. The 2 Sentries, very, very gas-heavy units, and the Colossi is always a good pick-off. But he lost, not only did he lose a lot of gateway units, but he lost a good amount of his gas army as well. So he's going to be focused on reproducing Colossus, reproducing a couple of Sentries so that he has force fields to zone out the units, and then remaking the gateway units that he lost. What this means is that he's not going to have, he got double forges, but he is not starting 2-2 because he doesn't have the, well, he should start in a little bit, but he cannot immediately start 2-2 because he had to replenish his army, like his gas has been cut into, and he has to put the gas that he would have wanted to put into his upgrades into his army instead. And oh, what was my other train of thought? Oh well, forget about it. If I forgot about it, there's no point in trying to remember it, because I'll never remember it. But that brings me on to my next point, that we see only 6 medevacs have been built at about the 12-minute and 30 mark. So what that tells us, based on the timing from MarineKingPrime's first starport and his first 2 medevacs at about the 10-30 minute mark, at the 12-30 minute mark, he has made 6 medevacs, and what that means is that he's been making medevacs consistently out of his starport. However, on the production tab, we take a look and we see the double upgrades, and we also see +1 vehicle weapons being researched very, very fast as well at the 12-minute 30 mark. So what this tells us is that MarineKingPrime is, once again, the theme of this video, I would say, is that he's emphasizing making his bio army as strong as possible. So that means getting his upgrades over getting like a better unit, instead of getting a better unit composition, he's just creating a very, very highly upgraded, very, very large basic type army. And okay, so my point was, before I started rambling off, is that he's cut Viking production in order to get the 2-2-1 going, all 3 of those upgrades. He's also cut SCVs. He's only at 49 SCVs right now. But the one thing that we see still going for him is that he's still making 3 Marauders and 4 Marines at the same time. So he's heavily prioritizing getting a gigantic bio army, and he's not cutting units out of his barracks. He's cutting different things such as SCVs and units out of his starport. He tries to take a little engagement over there. It doesn't work out quite as well, so he backs off. Wasn't the best engagement for him, but still okay. He escapes with a good portion of his army. And we see him, as soon as he has the money for it, starts 2 Vikings. But the priority isn't on the Vikings, it's on the bio army. If you stare at the production tab long enough, like I have, you'll start to see that, again, he's making SCVs now, but he cuts them out a lot. That's why he's only taking 1 gas at his 3rd as well, because he doesn't have enough saturation to saturate his 3rd base. But the thing that constantly keeps going is making those 3 Marauders and 4 Marines at once. We also see he's adding a 2nd starport as well. That's pretty standard for Colossus-based play. You need to amp up that Viking count really fast, and since he got his 2-2 so early, he's going to be hitting a 2-2 timing. We see here on HerO's production tab, his 3rd Nexus is almost ready. He's getting 2-2, +2 attack, +2 armor, and he's also getting charge for his Zealots. What he cannot do, however, is get a Templar Archives and start to either research Storm or add Archons into his army because of the earlier game damages that he sustained during the first 2 medevac attack. We see here MarineKingPrime with only 57 SCVs. Again, he isn't prioritizing SCVs. In fact, this is actually at the point where I saw him do it. So, just looking at his SCVs, I noticed he was making a couple SCVs, and then he started getting supply blocked, and he immediately canceled those SCVs to queue up units in his barracks before remaking the SCVs again. And I'll point that out really. Okay, so right here, there's 2 SCVs going down, and then he immediately cancels them to produce 2 more Vikings. And then he ends up remaking the SCVs again. So this tells us that he's completely focused on not his economy, but on creating a very large army. And that was just a little thing that kind of further gave proof to that, I guess. Just kind of like an interesting thing that you have to take a couple seconds to, you have to like relook at it to see like what was he doing there, and actually put together his decision making behind that. We see here he's stopped at 63 SCVs. He's still continuing units production, and his 2-2 is finished as well. Notice how he hasn't started 3-3 yet. He is not focused on getting 3-3 and going into the late game. This is purely to hit as hard as possible at a 2-2 timing, and to make it as effective as possible. One of the ways which he did that was trading earlier on so that HerO wouldn't have Storm Tech out by now, and also getting the earlier upgrades, prioritizing unit production over SCVs and economy. And we see here MarineKingPrime only has 5 gases as well. He never took his 6th gas. So now the actual fight's going to happen. Oh, and as a result of his hard macro labor, he has 6 medevacs from the early start of the game that he produced by the 12-minute 30 mark. He has 26 Marauders, 25 Marines, about a 1-to-1 unit ratio, and then 9 Vikings, which he was able to produce fairly fast as the fruit of the labor of the double starports working for him. Now, taking a look at this engagement, MarineKingPrime quickly goes back and creates a concave so that HerO is forced to fight. He ends up having to back up, and so what happens here is MarineKingPrime's army is just so big that by the time that by the time the force fields wear off, the only thing that's left is a big bio army versus a Protoss army with no tanking units. The goal of having this kind of a tanking army is not to neutralize the splash damage, but to kind of purposefully actually leave it alive and keep it for last while shredding through the lower tier gateway units instead. And I'll just go through the fight one last time, because it's the end of the game basically. But we see here only 13 Zealots. They're going to die really fast to 25 Marines and 25 Marauders. And he has 8 Stalkers, not nearly enough to do anything really against the Viking count or the bio army. So we see here the gateway units just getting absolutely shredded. Even though the Zealots have charged, they're pretty much charging to their death. And it doesn't even matter that HerO had a couple Colossus. When you have this big of a bio army, you can straight up fight Colossus, but only by themselves. With by the time they get to like 3 to 4, but I would say 4 to 5. 3 is like the maximum, or 4 is like the maximum depending on your angle. But more than 4 Colossus, then it gets really hard to start diving in with parts of your bio army to snipe off Colossus like we saw MarineKingPrime do here. And GG is called. HerO has to tap out because he wasn't able to adapt to MarineKing's style. So just a quick recap going over the game. MarineKing's style was unique and different because he had emphasized Marauder production and emphasized a very large bio army too. It's not that it's similar to the trying to pull your SCVs. You want to get that as big of an army as possible, but he wasn't pulling his SCVs, and he could easily transition into the later game. He was also set up very well for being able to start 3-3, being on 3 bases, and having a not bad army either. But yeah, just having a very, very heavy Marauder count also means that even though I didn't go over the games, if you take a look at his games versus, I believe, stats on King Sejong's station, he was able to seemingly tank through 1,000,000 storms with his big bio army, and that's mainly because he had a very Marauder heavy force. And so instead of using anti-splash damage to negate the splash, such as Ghosts and Vikings, he used tankiness so that he literally out-tanked all of the splash damage, and kind of like by dodging around it, he was able to take the wins. Yeah, so that pretty much brings an end to this video. Very short, very straightforward video. If you guys want me to do any other games from this stage, just comment below with the link, or at least the game name, so I can try to find it myself, and then I'll get to it as fast as possible. EJK out.